We had Murder, Mystery, and Makeup, a live digital premiere. It happened on October 15th, and what an experience. I mean, we laughed, we cried, we shared some intimate secrets. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. And we did it all live. It was so much fun, and it's all thanks to you, my audience. Thank you for joining me. But here's the thing. I know some of you missed it. I didn't see you there, okay? Or maybe you just forgot to get tickets. Maybe you were busy. Maybe you had plans, something. I don't know. Either way, that's okay. I got you. For the next 28 days, you can still buy a ticket and experience the entire event from start to finish as if you were there with us. If this sounds like something you want to do, head on over to moment.co/MMM to buy tickets to replay the big event. This truly is your last chance to see what Murder, Mystery, Makeup Live was all about. And if you're thinking, hey, why would I buy a ticket to a live event that is no longer live? That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. Well, this episode of Murder, Mystery, Makeup lives only on Moment by Patreon. So once that 28-day window closes, this episode is gone forever. It will not be available anywhere else, including on YouTube. So it's truly an exclusive story. And you can get your tickets to the 28-day replay over at moment.co/MMM. That's moment.co/MMM. Now let's get into today's episode of Darkh Hisory. Earlier this year, I kept getting sick, and I ended up in the hospital like 3 times. I know, it was nuts. I'm fine, don't worry. I was just having like a terrible reaction to something. It was awful. But while I was in the hospital bed, my doctor came in, and he was giggling a little, and he's like, I'm going to start calling you Typhoid Mary. And I was like laying there. Like, what? Who's Typhoid Mary? And what can I say? I mean, I get inspiration for these episodes in the strangest of places. I got to Googling Miss Typhoid Mary, and I learned all about Miss Mary Mallon. And boy, what a wild ride. Mary was a cook in the early 1900s, and the problem was, wherever she was cooking, people started getting sick, some even dying. I don't know why my doctor called me Typhoid Mary, because this is not me, but okay. For whatever reason, she just ignored the issues and she kept on cooking. And it had many thinking, like, was Mary spreading disease on purpose? I mean, she did work in rich households as a poor immigrant. Could this be like a reverse Robin Hood situation? Maybe she was like taking illness from the poor and giving it to the rich, I don't know. Or maybe she was the victim. Well, let's talk about it in today's episode of the Darkh History of Typhoid Mary. Hi, friends. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. My name is Bailey Sarian, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast, Darkh History. Here, we believe history does not have to be boring. I mean, it might be tragic, sometimes it's happy, but either way, it's our dark history. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, because I'm always posting new content. And the podcast airs on Wednesdays, but you can also join me over on YouTube to watch the episode on Thursdays. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that button, yeah. And also, let me know what you think down below in the comment section. I love hearing from you. And at the end, sometimes we read some of them. It's fun. Okay, let's get into it. So, listen. Everyone came in costumes today once again, and didn't let me know. We have Joan over here. Joan, are you a germ? Are you typhoid? Okay, that's cute. You're a little too close, though. And then I'm assuming Paul dressed up as Mary Mallon, aka Typhoid Mary, right? Fierce. You look good. Blue is your color. No comment? All right. You guys look great. I'm just Bailey. Okay. Long before she was known as Typhoid Mary, her name was Mary Mallon. So Mary was born in County Tyrone, Ireland on November 29th, 1869. She's a Sag, a free spirit, so this actually makes a lot of sense now. But at the time, listen, where she was born, this was one of the poorest counties in Ireland. So when she was only 15 years old, Mary got on a ship and headed to the United States, and she wasn't the only one. In the mid-1840s, tons of Irish immigrants were coming to the United States. And that's because back in Ireland, the country was going through the Great Hunger. Now, this is commonly known as the potato famine, where at least 1 million Irish people passed away, most from starvation. And those who were still alive, they were looking for a way out. Now, the population of Ireland at the time was like 9 million, and of that 9 million, 6 million depended completely or almost completely on the potato crop. And a third of the population was so poor that they lived mostly on potatoes. So when a mold wiped out most of the potato crop in 1845, it was catastrophic. Of course, there was other food, but people didn't have access to it. And the wealthy English landlords, they were harvesting crops and selling food to England and other countries. Pretty much everywhere but Ireland. It was f***ed up. 1 million Irish people died of starvation, and over 2 million people left Ireland just altogether looking for a better life. So Ireland ended up losing a third of its population in total. 75% of immigrants ended up in the United States. And by 1855, 80% of New York City's domestic workers were Irish immigrants. And pretty much anytime there's a big group of people from another country moving into a city, people just assume that the immigrants are here to take jobs and ruin things. So when this was all happening, most Americans were not very welcoming. In fact, if you were Irish, most people really disliked you, automatically. At the time, people would make jokes about the Irish being stupid, ugly, and dirty. I'm not saying that, that's what they were saying back then. There were political cartoons about it, just tearing them apart. It was ugly. Many Irish men found work doing labor, while the Irish women mostly got work as domestic servants. When I say servant, it's exactly what you're picturing. If you were working as a domestic servant, it was grueling work. It'd be 14-hour days you'd be working. And they would be the first ones up in the morning and the last ones to go to bed. And that was the world that Mary entered into as a teenager. Mary got a job working as a cook, which was great for her because it was one of the highest paying servant jobs that you could get. And Mary was really good at it. She landed a ton of different jobs working in multiple households for decades. By 1906, when Mary was in her 30s, the Warren family hired her as their cook. Now, she lived in their house in Oyster Bay in Long Island, and she would work there over the summer. But by the end of the summer, the Warrens' young daughter became ill with what was diagnosed as typhoid fever. Then that same week, 5 more people within the household began showing symptoms. Today's episode is brought to you by Liquid IV. As soon as November hits, my calendar fills up with a bunch of different parties. Suddenly, I'm way more worried about making a perfect charcuterie board for Thanksgiving than actually taking care of myself. That's why I'm happy to have Liquid IV. It helps me stay hydrated in between glasses of mulled wine or eggnog or, what other weird spiced alcohol we get pressure to drink. Packets of their hydration multiplier all come with 8 vitamins and nutrients, plus 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. It's designed to hydrate you better than just water alone. Not to mention, they're non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. It's perfect for when I'm nutmegged out and just want something refreshing. Personally, I'm all about their sugar-free raspberry melon flavor. That's why I always keep some nearby. I throw it in my bag or my purse, whatever, They're so easy. You just add a packet to water. You just add 1 stick of Liquid IV to 16 ounces of water and get ready to be hydrated and rejuvenated. Exactly what everyone needs to make it through whatever the holiday season throws at you. Tear, pour, live more. Stay hydrated through the holidays with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code Darkh Hisory at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Darkh Hisory at liquidiv.com. So, typhoid fever, what is it? I don't know. Well, let me tell you. It's an infection that's caused by bacteria. It's usually spread by water or food that's contaminated by fecal matter. And I know it sounds gross, but look, it's real. And it can hide like under your fingernails, on your hands, or your skin. And then, you like wipe your nose. Next thing you know, it's in your body. The disease would begin with like a headache. You would get fever, and then you would get like bloody, foul-smelling diarrhea. Then usually like a rash would form, followed by a high fever, which for some could lead to like death. Now at the time, typhoid was terrifying because there was no cure and a vaccine wasn't discovered until 1911. Plus, like antibiotics, they weren't even discovered until 1949. So if you got this, you just had to like hope for the best and wait it out, Now, of the 11 people that were staying at that summer home, 6 of them got sick. It was like mainly the workers, but not Mary. She never got it. And in fact, she appeared quite healthy. Like she showed no symptoms related to typhoid, which is kind of weird because like everyone around her got it. Now it was said that Mary was a stout woman with a robust, healthy appearance. She had dark hair, often pulled back or styled in a simple manner, with a round face and a strong, determined expression. Now at the time, typhoid fever was really associated with poverty and filth. So, this town, Oyster Bay, it was very affluent and they never had like an outbreak of typhoid before. So when the wealthy Warren family home had typhoid going around, it made no sense to them. They're like, we're rich. This doesn't happen to us, And like, not only was it deadly, it was low-key embarrassing. They're like, oh my God, we are not poor. This is not okay. When the owners of the house found out about the outbreak, they freaked out. The owner of the house was worried that none of the well-to-do people would want to rent this fancy home if they knew people like got typhoid there. So he hired people to come and inspect where the typhoid may have come from before word got out. Apparently the house had been a wedding present, and if they couldn't locate the source of the outbreak, it's possible that the house would be declared a health hazard and then burned. So eventually, the homeowner was introduced to Dr. Soer, who technically wasn't a doctor, but he was a sanitary engineer. One newspaper described him as a, quote, a doctor to sick cities, end quote. Oh, yeah, I don't know how he got the doctor title, but he did. But whatever. So they call him up. So Dr. Soer, he comes out to the Warren home and he gets to work. He's like, I'm going to figure out where this typhoid came from. They check every corner, the water, they check everywhere. So he does a little digging. And then Dr. Soer finds out that the Warrens had recently changed cooks. The most recent cook was Mary Mallon. And it was odd because now she was missing. She was nowhere to be found. And she had left with like no notice or explanation. She was just gone. It was like, oh, that's weird. Now, Dr. Soer is like putting the pieces together and he's like, the cook was really the only new thing that was introduced into the household. And this cook handled food, which all the people who got sick had eaten this food. So, Dr. Soer, after some time, it took him a while, he believed he had found the culprit. It was this Mary Mallon person. Now, after this, he was determined to find her before she got anyone else sick. So meanwhile, Mary was bouncing from job to job around New York. She was usually getting hired for like a few weeks or months, then moving on to like the next gig. At one point, Mary started working for a family on Park Avenue in New York City. And pretty soon, 2 cases of typhoid were reported. A maid and the daughter for the family Mary worked for. Now the daughter, she would end up dying within just a few days. And word gets back to Dr. Soer. Now when he hears about this death, most people would be like, oh, that's sad. But he was like, oh my God, what? Typhoid? Where? He knew in his head that this was probably Mary's doing. So Dr. Soer, he hops in his little car. I don't know what he does, but he gets his butt over to that family home on Park Avenue as soon as he could. So he just shows up like out of the blue, knocks on the door, and asks to speak to Mary Mallon. So she answers the door, and right off the bat, Dr. Soer is like accusing Mary of causing the typhoid, getting people sick, and even killing someone. I don't know, maybe Dr. Soper thought like she would just cooperate or like apologize. I don't know what he thought, but to his surprise, Mary was actually, she was pissed. She was pissed off. I mean, could you imagine you're working at your place of work, and then someone shows up and starts making wild accusations that you killed someone in front of your employer? You're like, hey, whoa, now is not the time, you know? So she was mad. She's like, what the fuck? So this guy is just like making wild accusations, calling her a killer, and then he was demanding samples of her urine, feces, and blood. Again, I'd be like, excuse me, who are you? Like, I don't know you. So Mary, she doesn't like say anything. She instead grabs a carving fork and then lunges at Soper, who I guess just like turns right around and he just gets the fuck out of there. So, I mean, Dr. Soper, he left the meeting empty-handed, and Mary was now feeling angry, scared, paranoid, and probably like a little suspicious of the whole situation. We're starting the holiday season, which means things are about to get wild. You know, there's just so much planning and shopping and so many gatherings and things to go to. It can be overwhelming. Plus, on top of all that, I'm supposed to be worrying about my meals day to day. What am I gonna eat? I don't know. Luckily, HelloFresh is there to make meals as hassle-free and delicious as possible. They're all delivered right to your home, but without all the annoying extra fees that come with takeout. You can skip the packed grocery stores and enjoy chef-crafted recipes all at once. These new recipes can help you get out of like your food rut. You know, that thing that you eat every single day and you're like, oh my God, this is so boring. HelloFresh helps you enjoy new and fun meals without having to hunt down all the specialty ingredients. One of my favorites is the French onion smothered chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans. It comes together super easily, but looks and tastes fancy. It's like, ooh, she went off. Joan, you look so fancy yourself. I mean, how many times have we talked about this, Joan? Just because dinner looks fancy doesn't mean you need to dress fancy. Well, actually, you look nice, so maybe you should. If you want to save yourself some stress and actually have fun cooking again, try HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Get 10 free meals at hellofresh.com/free Darkh Hisory. Applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only, varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to hellofresh.com/free Darkh Hisory. So this first encounter really left Dr. Soper confused. I mean, he thought Mary would comply and like hand herself over. He could not understand why she was so defensive. I mean, to him, he was only trying to offer her good medical attention. So now, after this, in his opinion, Mary was a menace to society. He's mad and he's determined. So Mary, she continues to work at the home on Park Avenue, and Dr. Soper, he knew this. So one night, he like goes to the home and he waited outside. He's like waiting for her to get off of work so he could follow her. Yeah. Okay, he's going full stalker. So Mary was walking home, whatever, and she stops at 33rd Street and 3rd Avenue where her boyfriend lived, a man named August Brioff. Now, Brioff was a former policeman, and he honestly, he didn't really have much going on in his life, I guess, based off what I read. I don't know. He drank a lot. He lived in a dirty apartment. He had a dog. And then other than that, he had Mary. Mary would often bring Brioff food and like take care of him. It's kind of sweet. And when Brioff wasn't at home doing nothing, he would spend his days in a saloon around the corner. Now, so remember, Soper like followed her here, and he was watching the situation from outside, like a creep. So I guess he was spying on them for a little bit because Soper takes notice of Brioff hanging at the saloon, and he thought the best way to get to Mary would be through this guy. He's like, yeah, that's my way in. So Dr. Soper, he's like, you know what? I'm going to go make friends with this guy. So one day he goes to the saloon and he becomes friends with Brioff. Now, Soper actually wrote about this encounter and said, quote, "I got well acquainted with him. He took me to see his room. I should not care to see another place like it. It was a place of dirt and disorder," end quote. So that's really nice of him, you know. Okay, so that night, Dr. Soper went to the Briolf's home with him. And he decides, like, I'm just going to wait here until Mary shows up. Well, finally, Mary walks in. And right away, she was pissed. She was angry when she saw Soper waiting there for her. I mean, what was he doing? Like, stalking her? Like, leave me alone. She's like, what is this? What? So once again, like, Soper tried to explain to Mary that he believed that she was giving people typhoid. But Mary, like, refused to hear him out. She never had typhoid. How could she be giving it to people? You know, like, he was incorrect. She had been in perfect health, and she would not allow anyone to come to her home and make such wild accusations about her. So once again, she, I guess, chased Dr. Soper out. So Dr. Soper, he felt like he had no other choice but to take the case to the New York City Health Department. He called Mary a, quote, living culture tube and chronic typhoid germ producer, end quote. That's so sweet. Wow. I mean, like, he doesn't really know for sure, but he really went for it, you know? He was quick to tell everyone how big and strong Mary was. And it was almost like he wanted to have an excuse for, like, letting this woman chase him away multiple times. Here's how he described her to other people. Mary had a good figure and might have been called athletic had she not been a little too heavy. She prided herself on her strength and endurance. Okay. Mary was about 5'6", so that's the monster of an athlete we're talking about here. I didn't look up how tall Soper was. He must have been, you know, a little bit, maybe shorter. I don't know. But the New York City Health Department decided to send another doctor to help Soper, a woman named Dr. S. Josephine Baker. I know, I was like, what? Crossover episode? But no, there's no relation to the American-born French dancer, singer, and actress, Josephine Baker, who we've done a Darkh Hisory episode on. No relation, not the same person, just the same name. What are the odds, huh? But they thought, the health department, they thought that, like, maybe sending a woman might get through to Mary more so than a man. If a woman came up to you and was like, hey, I want to talk, you might listen. A man, you're like, get the fuck away from me. But they failed to mention to Dr. Baker that Mary might be a little difficult, you could say. So Dr. Baker, she's very excited. She's like, I'm going to Park Avenue to, collect some samples from this Mary woman. So she goes to the home, and right off the bat, Mary once again slammed the door in her face. So the next day, a horse-drawn ambulance from the health department was sent to Mary's workplace. Very dramatic. Then, I guess, like, 3 policemen, they show up, and they surround the house, and they're trying to, like, block any of the possible escape routes. So they're doing that, and Dr. Baker, she rang the doorbell. Mary, once again, she answers. She sees them again, and she tried to slam the door, but there was a cop with Dr. Baker. The cop, like, put his foot inside the door, so she couldn't shut it. You know what I'm saying. So I guess at this point, Mary had turned around. She bolted to the kitchen and, like, disappeared. She was gone. So Dr. Baker and the officer, they run into the house. They're chasing after her. They are asking the other workers in the home, like, where'd she go? Where'd she take off to? But they had no answers. So they're looking around. They search the closets, the basement, the living quarters, but they just, like, could not find her. They would continue searching for 3 hours, calling for backup, but they got nowhere. So I guess Miss Mary, she had, like, run out the door. She hopped a fence and she hid in an outside water closet in the backyard of a neighboring house. And she was just hiding in there. Well, the police and Dr. Baker, they eventually find her. And she was, like, trapped in this room. She had nowhere else to go, So they got her cornered. And according to Dr. Baker, Mary had fought, she struggled, and she cursed while she tried to explain that Dr. Baker was trying to explain that she only wanted specimens and then she can go back home. Like, that's all we need. So Mary again is refusing to comply with these people. So a policeman just ends up picking her up and they put her in the ambulance, and it was said that Dr. Baker like sat on top of her the whole way to the hospital so she wouldn't escape. So once they got Mary to the Willard Parker Hospital, the doctors for the New York City Health Department finally got what they wanted: Mary's stool samples. So according to the first analysis of Mary's stool samples, they revealed a, quote, pure culture of typhoid. Ugh, so it was true. Typhoid seemed to follow her, and she couldn't argue that. The health officials, they called her dirty, and now they were calling her a murderer. The doctors told her that she carried the sickness inside of her body and she was spreading it with her dirty hands. But this was like, I guess, very, very insulting to Mary. You know, she was proud of the work she had done. To her, she's thinking like, if I'm so sick, like why did it take so many policemen to like take me down? You know, like if I'm so sick, how come I don't have any typhoid symptoms? What do you mean I'm sick? I mean, to her, they were the sick ones coming after her like this. I mean, they were obsessed with her. She's minding her business one day, and then the next, like she's locked up in a hospital with random people coming in and out making wild accusations. You're the sick ones. So with Mary being restrained at the hospital, Dr. Soper decided to pay her a visit. Oh yes. He's like, they got her. So he goes and he sees her, and once again he's trying to explain like what they were doing and that nobody wanted to harm her, but also, in my personal opinion, it kind of seemed like he wanted like, you were right, Dr. Soper, from her. You know, he wanted a you're right, but she didn't give that to him. Dr. Soper told her that these germs were most likely growing in her gallbladder, and the best way to like get rid of the germs would be to get rid of her gallbladder. Now, when she hears this, she didn't have anything to say. He then told her that he wanted to write a book about her case. But first, she would need to answer his questions. And most of all, he wanted to know like how many times she had caused a typhoid outbreak. And Mary's listening to this and she's like, now is not the time to talk about a fucking book deal, okay? Like, I'm locked up in a hospital, like, what? Like, come on. No, she's just mad. So instead, she just gets up, she doesn't say anything, and she locked herself in the bathroom. She didn't say a word to Dr. Soper. So between March 20th and November 16th, Mary was tested 3 times a week while staying in the hospital. Now, a few of those tests, they did come back negative, and nobody could figure out why. Like, it wasn't consistent. So Mary claimed that because some of these tests were negative, she like couldn't be the one infecting all these people, right? She's like, it's negative. It's not me. And she wanted to leave. She was still at the hospital. So she didn't understand like why she was still being locked up if these tests were coming back negative. Well, Dr. Soper blamed Mary for her circumstances. He told her that since she had refused to help him or like any of the other doctors, she had to be kept in this tiny room. I mean, they didn't trust her. She's probably gonna run off and kill more people. So again, Dr. Soper, he tells Mary like there are a few things that she could do to stop spreading the disease. Like for starters, she should wash her hands after using the bathroom. Now to you and I, we're like, yeah, you should do that. Maybe. And maybe she was. We don't know, but he assumed that she wasn't. To be fair, it would have been like extremely difficult for Mary to fully remove all of the bacteria from her hands, even if she was washing them often. Why, you ask? Well, in order to rid any of the typhoid bacteria she was allegedly carrying, she would have to scrub her hands under hot water for at least 30 seconds. And when I say like hot, I mean scalding hot water, because the typhoid bacteria can't be killed in less than 150 degree water. And washing your hands in 150 degree water isn't something that you can just do. You can't do it because you would get like 3rd-degree burns in a matter of seconds. So, gloves? Anyways, so even if she was washing her hands, you know, I don't even know why he was recommending it if she can't even wash her hands in 150 degree water. So kind of like shit advice. But okay, whatever. But Mary wasn't doing that. You know, she wasn't burning her hands off. So Dr. Soper kept recommending that Mary have surgery to remove her gallbladder because, again, they believed like it was living in there. But she didn't want to have her gallbladder removed. I mean, she didn't trust Soper. She didn't trust these medical doctors. She didn't trust the medicine. And at this time, like, most people didn't. So you can't really blame her. And again, these people had stalked and like kidnapped her. She's like, you're not going to have my gallbladder. Is this like a black market plan or something? I don't know. So Mary did not want to cooperate. So once she refused to not do the surgery and not help Dr. Soper with his book, this is when things were taken to a whole new level.
I love reading. I buy a lot of books, many books, way too many books. I have big plans to read all of them, of course, but sometimes, you know, you're busy, life gets crazy, whatever, and finding time to sit down and read can feel, it's like when, you know. That's why I love Audible. Audible is an app that offers an amazing selection of audiobooks. That way I can read a book while I'm getting other things done, like cleaning, working out, driving, sometimes just laying on the couch and listening, you know. No matter what I'm doing, I can listen to a great audiobook or even one of their exclusive Audible originals. They've got everything from bestsellers, new releases, to amazing podcasts. And they're adding so much more content all of the time. So no matter whose turn it is to choose a book for your book club, Audible will always have you covered. Listening to a great audiobook can change your whole mood, you know? Great stories help inspire your imagination and can create new ways of thinking. So don't miss out on that just because your life is busy. There's more to imagine when you listen. Sign up for a free 30-day Audible trial and your first audiobook is free. Visit audible.com/Darkh Hisory.
So Mary was staying at this one hospital, right? Well, then they moved her to North Brother Island to be kept in total isolation so she could no longer infect people. Now, North Brother Island is a tiny little island smack dab in the middle of the East River in New York City. It's between the Bronx and Rikers Island. Now, this island was originally purchased from the Dutch by New York, specifically to isolate people with infectious diseases. They built Riverside Hospital there so that patients could be contained and then also get treatment. And most people, they assumed if you were being sent to this hospital, it was most likely you weren't leaving alive. Now, again, to Mary, it didn't make any sense to her as to why she's being kept at the hospital. She didn't have any of these symptoms of typhoid. She is confused, really confused. So they end up putting her in this little cottage on the island, and this is where she was forced to live. Now, this little cottage, it's kind of cute. It's small, looks like a little hut. It was originally built for staff to live in, and it was nice. It had its own living room, a little kitchen and a bathroom. It also had plumbing and electricity, so she was allowed to cook for herself and just hang out by herself all alone. It was a very lonely place because she couldn't be around anyone. So I guess every few days she would be tested for typhoid. But other than that, Mary was just totally alone all of the time. Start to go a little crazy, I'm sure. So by 1909, 2 years after she was first taken into custody, 2 years, Mary decided, she's you know what, I'm gonna sue the health department. So she wrote a letter describing her treatment and living situation on the island. Now in it, she described being tested multiple times a week and developing terrible anxiety from being kept in isolation. She described it as being a peep show for the interns and the other doctors to come and just look at her. She just felt like a caged animal. I guess her anxiety got so bad that one of her eyelids started to twitch and eventually became fully paralyzed. You know what I learned recently? This is a side note, it has nothing to do with anything. But my eye was twitching a lot. And then my doctor told me it was because I was really stressed. I just didn't know that was a thing. So I could see this happening to Mary, you know? She's probably stressed, riddled with anxiety. I didn't know it could be paralyzed though, that's really scary. Anyways, so that happened. So in her letter, Mary wrote about how she was almost released from the island until another doctor said that she could only go if she agreed to have her gallbladder removed. But the doctors would flip-flop. It was like 1 week it was the gallbladder. The next week they would tell her the bacteria was in her intestines. Then they would say, oh, no, it's actually in the muscle of your bowels. And then they'd circle back and be like, no, actually, sorry, it's the gallbladder. You need to have that removed. So it was confusing. I mean, how could she trust what they were saying when it changed all of the time? So Mary just kept refusing surgery. So, time's passing. She's thinking a lot. And she's like, I want to prove that, I don't have typhoid. So she's like, hey, what if I have, an independent lab test my samples? Maybe these doctors here are, messing with me. Let me try a different doctor. So remember Brioff, Mary's kind of little boyfriend? Well, he was on the job. So he would take the ferry to the island, collect Mary's samples, and then bring them to an independent lab. Now, each of her samples came back negative for typhoid. She's like, see, I don't have it. Now, there are a few reasons the test could have been wrong. The samples could have been old. Someone could have made a mistake in the lab, or maybe typhoid just wasn't present in every single sample that Mary provided. But to Mary, this only confirmed what she already knew, that these doctors were making up lies to ruin her life. So she continued with her case, hoping to earn back her freedom. A little side rumor. People believe that William Randolph Hearst was the one who actually paid for Mary's attorney. But even with her negative test results and a defense attorney arguing her case, the court decided that the Board of Health was allowed to keep her in custody. Now, to them, they were protecting the community. So Mary was sent back to the island, and she's like, shit, now what? I guess she started picking up little odd jobs around the place. I mean, what else was she supposed to do to pass the time? Now, there was one job she had where she was helping care for the sick children who were staying in the hospital. I know, at first I was like, is that a good idea? But, I mean, they're already sick, so I don't know. But I guess the kids, they really liked her. Well, time passed, and finally, after about 3 years of fighting for her freedom, Mary was allowed to leave the island. Oh, yes. So the doctors, they're like, you can leave, but we have a few conditions. They told Mary that she had to promise to never work as a cook again. I'm laughing because it's promise? Pinky promise? Okay. And then, so she can't work as a cook, and she promised. In return, the health commissioner offered to help her find work. Also, she would need to check in with the health department every 3 months. Now, this was mostly so they could keep track of her, know where she's living, where she's at, and if there were any typhoid outbreaks in that area, they could link it to her, essentially. So Mary's like, sure, I'll do whatever, And she agrees, and she was finally released back into society in 1910. Man, she's been through it. She's been completely isolated. Anyhow. So Mary was now 41 years old, and she was starting back at square one. She was able to find herself a job working as a laundress, but it didn't pay nearly as well as being head of the kitchen, So she tried to sue the Board of Health for keeping her prisoner and was seeking $50,000 in damages. But the judge threw out her case. So things are bad. And, when it rains, it pours. And Mary's boyfriend, Brioff, he became very ill. He was having heart problems. So Mary had him admitted to the hospital. Now, sadly, her one partner in this life would die. Now, this just made her dislike the medical profession a little bit more. She was worn down, and she was at her last straw. She's like, look, I got nothing to lose at this point. No one is on my side. F this. So, Mary stopped checking in with the health department, and she completely disappeared. She changed her name, and she went back to the one thing she was good at, cooking.
I've been trying to mix things up lately, like trying new foods, doing new experiences, and even trying out different styles. I know, I'm trying to be adventurous. Except when it comes to finding a new doctor. No one wants to take a gamble on a medical provider. Well, luckily, I don't have to, thanks to ZachDo. ZachDo is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. ZachDo can filter doctors who take your insurance and even make sure all of your options are all highly rated by verified patients. I'm talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care, skin care, so much more. They have everything. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can even score same-day appointments. I love that you can actually see on the app or the website like when there are appointment openings for yourself, and you just click and you book. Like, it's so easy. You don't have to talk to anybody. Recently, I needed a new therapist, so I went right onto ZocDoc and I found one that takes my insurance, and it's nice because it has the option to do like over video. You don't have to go in person, you know? So I booked that and I found myself a new therapist, and it's been great. I love ZocDoc. Highly recommend it. I really do. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/Darkh Hisory to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com/Darkh Hisory. ZocDoc.com/Darkh Hisory.
So Mary couldn't go back to work under her real name. At this point, like, her name, Mary Mallon, had been published in newspapers all over the country. They were all over the story. The papers talked about how dirty and diseased she was, and the name Typhoid Mary had become like a bit of a joke. It was a punchline, like with my doctor. So same thing, different times. So she knew like nobody would hire Mary Mallon. So she had to use different names. For 5 years, Mary took jobs wherever she could find work. I mean, at restaurants, hotels throughout like New York and New Jersey. And eventually she ended up employed as a cook at the Sloan Maternity Hospital. Yeah, maternity hospital. Now, in March of 1915, that hospital had an outbreak of typhoid. Oh no, Mary. Oh, what are you doing? I know. Now, 25 people, most of them were nurses and doctors, they became ill. And then it was said that like 2 people had died. Now, the head gynecologist at Sloan Hospital picked up the phone and made a call to someone who was known for being great at tracking down disease outbreaks. That's right, Dr. Soer. Man. So Dr. Soer, he comes in to the maternity hospital, and this day that he comes in, Miss Brown, or AKA Mary Mallon, she wasn't working. She was off. So Dr. Soer was like snooping around, and I guess he saw something that was very interesting. He saw a recipe that was written in Mary's handwriting. And I guess he immediately like recognized the writing as Mary's, because she was like, she needed to pass the time while she was on that island, and she would write him threatening letters. So he was like, I recognize that handwriting. That's Mary. So Dr. Soer, he hung out and he waited for her to come back to the hospital. She had to come sometime. But Mary like must have gotten word of like what was going on, because she gone, vanished, poof. Bye. She's like, nope. So Dr. Soer and stuff, they were able to like find Mary through friends, and I guess she was staying at like a friend's house on Long Island. Now police go out there and stuff, and apparently they recognized her because of her distinctive walk. Dr. Soer described how she, quote, walked more like a man than a woman. He just like really did not like her. He's like, bro, chill. Okay, but the cops show up to this friend's house where like Mary was at, and they bring backup because she has a reputation for fighting. But Mary was surrounded once again, and she just didn't have that same fight in her anymore. She was 46. She was tired. They got her into custody, and then they ended up sending her back to that familiar little cottage on North Brother Island. And this time, she was there to stay. Now, at this point, well, yeah, I mean, no newspapers or anything. They had nothing nice to say about her. You know why? Because she was working at a maternity hospital, so around babies and pregnant women, knowing that she was infected, and to them, that was selfish, other words that I can't think of, and they just ripped her to shreds. Her life was officially over, and I think she knew it. So Mary would end up spending the next 23 years of her life living in isolation on the island. It was said that she kept busy sewing, crocheting, baking, reading, becoming friends with the staff. I mean, she really had no choice. There are only people around. And then in 1918, the hospital would allow Mary to go on day trips to New York. So she would go visit the few friends that she had left, and then she would return to the island in the evening. Which is weird if you think about it, because if they think she's infecting everyone, why would they let her leave still? That's weird. It's just confusing. It's I don't know, right? It's just what? Well, one of Mary's friends on the island was Dr. Alexandra Plavska. I think I know that. So she trained Mary in lab work, and the hospital gave her a job as a lab assistant. And Dr. Plavska would have Mary over for dinner, and it would be her and her daughter. Her daughter's name was Julie. And Julie described meeting Mary, saying she was a part of the family and we really loved her. Julie also described Mary as having, quote, loving eyes. And it was finally someone had something nice to say. Geez Louise. This whole time it's just everyone was so mean. Julie also said that after Mary would leave, her mother would boil all the dishes, to disinfect them, just in case. Be safe. Well, one day in 1932, Mary didn't show up to work. And this was very out of character for her. She was known to be a reliable worker. She was never late. They were what else is she doing? She can't say she was stuck in traffic. So they go looking for her. And that day, they discover Mary on the floor of her cottage. I guess she was paralyzed after suffering from a stroke. Now, after this, she had lived in the hospital bed for 6 years. She died in November of 1938 without ever experiencing symptoms of typhoid fever. Mary was buried in St. Raymond Cemetery in the Bronx. And you can actually go see it. If you go see it, take a picture and send it to me. Send me pictures. I'm always asking you guys to send me pictures, and I never get any. So someone do it for me. Thank you. I want to see it. So in the end, Mary was linked to the infection of at least 122 people. Now, 5 of those people ultimately died of the disease. But here's something wild. You see, while Mary was living on North Brother Island, there was another carrier of typhoid who was living and working in New York. Yes. Now this man, his name was Tony Labella, he was also completely symptom-free. Now Tony was a farm worker, but after he was discovered as a carrier, he was forbidden from handling food. He was linked to 87 typhoid cases, and 2 of them ended in death. Now, this Tony guy, he didn't listen to instructions, and he went right back to work. He left New York and he went to New Jersey. And while he was there, he caused 35 more cases plus 3 more deaths. Now, he was held in isolation for 2 weeks, but then he was released and he got to just live his life. So that was weird. And then there was also another man who worked in bakeries and restaurants who was also a carrier. He was told not to handle food, but he did it anyway. So when he was caught making a strawberry shortcake, which is super cute, right? He was brought before a judge. That judge said that he couldn't send him to jail and he would leave it up to the Department of Health. So this guy, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but he was not forced to live in any kind of isolation. He just got to live a normal, free life. So, I mean, what I'm getting at is it turns out like there were Typhoid Johns, Typhoid Tommies just running around the East Coast, and they never had their lives ruined like Mary. So why is that? Is the question. So in some cases, I guess the health department was more lenient with like these carriers because they were men with families to support. So they're like, oh, it's fine, you could do whatever you want. Yeah, talk about a double standard. By the time Mary died, research showed that hundreds of people could be carriers of the disease while remaining symptom-free. And the only thing that was different was the way that she specifically was treated. Just her. Now, Mary Mallon is still known worldwide as Typhoid Mary. She was painted as a reckless and dirty woman who was either malicious or stupid in her spread of the disease. I mean, really, Mary was so much more than Typhoid Mary, you know? She took a lot of crap from a lot of different people. From the rich family she worked for, to the health department, to the doctors. Mary had plenty of reason to be angry. Now, decades after her death, celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain, he wrote a book about Mary Mallon. I know, I read it. Do you follow me on Goodreads? I read it and I rated it. No, whatever. It was a really good book. Oh my God, it was really good. It was good. And in it, he relates to her as a chef. I mean, even pointing out like what a nightmare her job must have been. He writes, quote, "Had I worked in the homes of the rich and silly circa 1906, I would have murdered them in their beds with the nearest available blunt object. I was never tough enough to put up with what Mary put up with." End quote. Mary infected a lot of people with typhoid fever. Whether any of those she did knowingly, I doubt it, but we won't know for sure. But at the end of the day, she was locked up for it all the same. After reading this and learning about it, every time I wash my hands now, you know, after I go to the bathroom or before I like make some food, I give a little nod and think of Miss Mary Mallon. The end. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hey, what a journey, huh? But next week, guess what? We are going to be talking about a very different kind of scandal. A scandal that has to do with an item that you and I probably never think about anymore. Matches. Yeah? Matches. We're going, yeah, matches. You know, in the late 1800s, matches were found in pretty much everyone's homes. Now, people, they bought them from the store and they didn't give like any thought about how they were made. That is, until one journalist wrote a horrifying expose on what was really going down in the factories. Now, workers, they were suffering from a painful and deadly disease, leaving parts of their faces literally falling off. Oh, it's wild. Yeah, all of this because of matches? Oh yes. Oh, yes. So join us next week when we talk about the Matchstick Girls. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I want to hear your thoughts on Typhoid Mary, if she should have been locked up, isolated. What is the approach with that one? I don't know. I just feel bad for her. So sad. Well, friends, thanks for hanging out with me today. You can join me over on my YouTube where you can watch these episodes on Thursday after the podcast airs. Hi. And while you're there, you can also catch my murder mystery and makeup. That's on Mondays. I love to hear you guys' reactions to today's story, so make sure to leave a comment below so I can see what you guys are saying, and your comment might even be featured in a future episode. Now let's read a couple of comments you guys have left me. Cheryl C2049 left me a comment saying, "I love Bailey's talking style, and she talks history like Gossiping Week with Bailey." Cheryl, thank you so much. Honestly, so I used to hate history. Oh my God. I think I got like a D- in high school. Thank you so much. Because it was boring. But as I got older and I learned about it, I was like, oh my God, history is basically just all hot gossip and like a lot of murder. It's wild, right? And it's so complicated in school, and it doesn't have to be. They make it so complicated. So I thank you for hanging out with me, and I'm glad you like my talking style. Steph Oliver left me a comment saying, "I hope Bailey feels an immense sense of pride when she says things like, 'We covered that in the XYZ episode, remember? Professor Sarian, I've learned so much.'" Oh, these are all so nice. Thank you. Steph, that is really so sweet of you. honestly, we've covered so much here on Darkh History, and I've learned so much. And you know what's cool? This is probably the coolest part about like the whole Darkh History thing, is if I get invited to like a party or somewhere, the knowledge I can just drop at any moment on the most random things. I'm like, oh, you want to talk about Stalin? Listen, baby, let me tell you. Or like, oh, dildos? Do you know the history of dildos? I could just go on and on. Corn? You want to talk about corn? It's so fun. I'm a great party favor. Whatever, whatever. Yeah, it's cool. I love learning. It's my favorite. Honey Badger Girl 77 left us an episode suggestion saying, oh no, a whole episode on Helen Keller would be wild. She had an incredible life. Honey Badger Girl 77, listen, I know. There has been like so much back and forth about Helen Keller online. I agree. She definitely had an interesting life. What I've read so far. She met some interesting characters. She had some weird beliefs, but good ones too. And have you seen bumper stickers lately? There's been bumper stickers in my neighborhood that say Helen Keller Denier. I want to know more about this. What is this about and why is it a thing? But yeah, I think actually that would be a good idea. I know I've told this story a million times, but I'm going to tell you again just in case you haven't heard it, because it makes me laugh every time. I used to get Helen Keller and Lizzie Borden mixed up. You know Lizzie Borden, the one who took an axe and murdered her whole family? I thought she was blind and deaf. And I was like, what? She murdered her whole family with an axe and she's blind and deaf, and then she went on to like win awards and stuff? And I thought that to be true for the longest time, like embarrassingly long. But I know now, not the same person, but it's a fun thought. Huh? Okay. Thank you. Helen Keller. I'll write it down. There it is. I appreciate you guys so much for watching and engaging. So keep commenting because maybe you'll be featured in a future episode. And hey, if you don't know, Darkh History is an Audio Boom original. Special thank you to our expert, Susan Campbell Bartoletti, author of Terrible Typhoid Mary, a true story of the deadliest cook in America. And I'm your host, Bailey Sarian. I hope you have a good day, you make good choices, and I'll be talking to you guys real soon. Goodbye.